this area. So basically, that's saying something, but it's saying something in a weird kind of roundabout way that makes it sound like this is something bad. So citizens, proudly declared citizens of the United States, by allowing other people to come in and have rights here, we are indeed giving up our sole and exclusive rights to have total say, have the only say in how things are done, in who gets what, all sorts of things like that. I mean, so yeah, in that sense, it is true that by allowing more people in, you do give up something. But it would also be true, by the same token, that if you closed off all the borders of the United States, build a huge wall, no one could come in or go out. You have, let's say, 1 million people here. If those 1 million people have children, and those children grow up to become full-fledged citizens, you are giving up some of that same sole and exclusive right to have the final and complete and unarguable say over everything to those children. So the only difference would be, well, these are our children, as opposed to these are people coming from somewhere else. But it's not really that much of a difference. I mean, either way, with each new generation, the previous generation is giving up some rights to them, giving up some exclusive rights, some of the exclusivity of their rights to the new generation, to each new generation. So it's not really that different. And I don't really see that how, your kids coming along and getting some of my exclusive right to say how things should be, it's no, I don't know how to put this nicely, but I don't really have any great affection for your kids just because they're yours and you were a fellow citizen when you had them. So I don't see how that's particularly different from someone coming from Spain or Czechoslovakia or Australia or wherever, Mexico, and my giving up some of the exclusivity of my complete control over things to them. It doesn't make that much difference unless, and here's the tricky part, and Trump has talked about this in other speeches recently about people having good genes. And he's talking about how his followers have great genes and they come from hardy stock and all this stuff. That's kind of weirdly oh, really? That's sort of racial stuff there. What does that even mean? It's this assumption that because you are related to someone that did something, you carry some of those characteristics along to yourself, and therefore I don't know. I mean, he didn't come out and explicitly say, because you're white, but he might as well have. And he's done enough of that sort of thing over time for it to be fairly clear that what he meant was, because you're mainly white and you like me, then you're good, and that you will have good children and good whatever. But I don't know. I don't buy that myself. And I can't imagine anyone else buying it. Anyway, I'm rambling now. I need to move on here. I lost my place completely. My screen keeps going off, which is weird. And I really want to get through this without there being any more problems. I don't know why I keep having these problems. I got a new video card for this computer, but something is amiss. All right. Okay. I lost my place. Oh yeah, proudly declare, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, to sum it all up, it's most of that statement there is just nonsense, and it's political speak that's supposed to sound like something and get you excited about an idea without really saying anything that you can really point to and say, well, yeah, he made a good point. He didn't make any point, really, except that he wants you to think that people on the left, like me, and probably like most people who would sit through the entirety of this show, are bad. And we're trying to do bad things to people on the right, which are the good people, and the only ones who are proudly citizens of the United States and trying to protect America against the invading hordes of whatever. Anyway, I'm going to go on. Sorry about that rambling distraction. Most states currently draw congressional districts determining the areas that each elected official represents based on total population, including unauthorized immigrants. The current maps are due to be redrawn in 2021 after the results of the 2020 census come in and the stakes are high. Each redistricting has a lasting influence on who is likely to win elections, which communities are represented in Congress, and ultimately which laws are passed. The memo, which many legal experts have characterized as blatantly unconstitutional, has been challenged in federal court. If it survives, it would reduce the population counts in areas where foreign-born populations have traditionally settled, primarily Democratic-run cities, and therefore undermine their political power relative to more rural, Republican-run areas. But it could also impact red states with large immigrant populations, including Texas. During his first term, Trump has primarily focused on clamping down on unauthorized immigration at the southern border and has succeeded in bringing down the number of migrants apprehended to about 38,000 in July 2020, down from a peak of about 133,000 in May 2019. Trump has signaled that deporting the estimated 10.5 million unauthorized immigrants living in the U.S. would become his next priority if he wins re-election. That would only create more fear and uncertainty for unauthorized immigrants who have lived in the U.S. for an average of 15 years, and their U.S. citizen children. More than 16.7 million people, including 6 million children, share a home with at least one family member who is unauthorized. It would also cripple industries that rely on unauthorized immigrant labor, including farming, construction, production, and service industries. We saw a big push on interior enforcement in 2017 and in 2018 and 19. The administration got sidetracked by the southern border. Sarah Pierce, a policy analyst at the Migration Policy Institute, said, "There's been a gaping hole in their hardline immigration resume." Before the pandemic hit, it appeared that Trump's focus was already shifting. He has repeatedly said that he wants to end birthright citizenship, the constitutional guarantee to all children born in America, regardless of their parents' nationality, which he sees as a factor that draws unauthorized immigrants to come and live in the U.S. But it's not clear how he could do that, or if he even has the legal authority to do so. He does not, but anyway. In February, his administration started issuing subpoenas to sanctuary cities in California, Colorado, Connecticut, New York, and Oregon, ordering local law enforcement to hand over immigration on foreign nationals it was seeking to deport. It sent armed and highly trained law enforcement units from the SWAT-like Border Patrol Tactical Unit to sanctuary cities across the country to support ICE in carrying out routine immigration aids and, more recently, to Portland to quell ongoing protests over police brutality and systemic racism. U.S. Attorney General Bill Barr also announced earlier this year that his agency would begin meticulously reviewing the policies of local governments and district attorneys to determine whether they are complying with laws prohibiting the harboring or shielding of unauthorized immigrants, filing lawsuits against the state of New Jersey and King County, Washington, which includes Seattle. It is his comfort zone to go after people of color and turn them into sort of a specter of scary, violent people as a political strategy. All these policies taken together represent what immigration restrictionists call the attrition through enforcement strategy, once embraced by former Republican presidential nominee Mitt Romney, essentially making immigrants' living conditions so miserable that they decide to leave the country on their own volition, Rivlin said. The administration has dialed back its interior enforcement efforts somewhat during the pandemic, vowing to delay enforcement actions until after the crisis or utilize alternatives to detention. For all but people who pose a public safety risk or have committed crimes that require their detention. The agency also said it would not arrest immigrants at sensitive locations, including healthcare facilities. There has been at least one documented case, however, in which that policy was violated. But once the crisis subsides, Trump could consider it open season on unauthorized immigrants living in the U.S. Trump is still working on achieving what his border wall cannot, keeping out migrants from Central America, even if they're seeking humanitarian protection, and making the immigration system put America first. His administration's regulatory agenda provides another glimpse into some of the ways he's aiming to achieve that. The regulatory process is often lengthy, spanning months or even years. Officials first have to draft a regulation, provide the public with notice, give the public an opportunity to comment and review and address those comments in the final version of the rule. With high-profile regulations that attract thousands of comments, the process can drag out even longer. But if Trump wins re-election, time would be on his side. The administration is pursuing a slew of changes to the process by which migrants can apply for asylum and their eligibility requirements. In June, it proposed a draft regulation that would allow immigration officials to discard asylum seekers' applications as frivolous without so much as a hearing, and make it all but impossible for victims of gang-related and gender-based violence to obtain protection in the U.S. It would also refuse asylum to anyone coming from a country other than Canada or Mexico, or who does not arrive on a direct flight to the U.S., as well as anyone who has failed to pay taxes, among other provisions. And in July, the administration announced another proposal that would allow immigration officials to turn away asylum seekers from countries with any active disease outbreak, even beyond the coronavirus pandemic, that poses a threat to public safety. The Trump administration is also pursuing regulations that would create new roadblocks for immigrants facing deportation proceedings in immigration court. Their proposals would expand the U.S. Attorney General's authority to intervene in immigration court cases, potentially politicizing the proceedings, and speed up immigration court processing in a way that immigrant advocates fear could deprive asylum seekers of a fair day in court. Regulations reforming the H-1B visa program for skilled workers are also underway. More than 85,000 immigrants get H-1B visas annually, including more than 1,000 apiece for workers at tech giants such as Google and Amazon. Recipients are currently selected by lottery, but Trump is proposing to instead prioritize workers with the highest wages and raise the program's minimum wage requirements. He is also proposing to bar the issuance of H-1Bs to outsourcing firms that bring in employees, primarily from India, on these visas to fill IT positions, at times displacing American workers, a practice that lawmakers in both parties agree should be prohibited through reforms. And he wants to strip employment eligibility from the visa holders' spouses and place new restrictions on optional practical training, or OPT, a work experience program for foreign graduates at U.S. universities that often serves as a stepping stone to an H-1B visa. If Trump succeeds in pushing these regulations through, it will be that much more difficult for his successors to undo his policies. They wouldn't be able to do so with just the stroke of a pen, but rather would have to go through the same protracted process of giving public notice and the opportunity to comment. Trump can act unilaterally on immigration policy in all but one arena. He needs Congress's help to re-envision legal immigration. The expansion of the use of executive authority on immigration policy has been driven in part by the long-time impasse on immigration issues in Congress, which last passed a major immigration reform bill in 1986. The only time Trump tried to work with Congress on immigration was in 2018, when he sought to bargain over permanent protection for DACA recipients after he tried to rescind the program. When he made clear he wouldn't sign the compromise bill that Republicans and Democrats had been working on, they abandoned the effort and have not returned to the negotiating table since. But Trump hasn't given up on the idea of comprehensive immigration reform. In July, he repeatedly suggested that the administration was working on an immigration bill that would address, among other issues, legal status for DACA recipients, saying it would create an immigration system based on merit. It's not clear whether he was referring to his son-in-law's immigration proposal that was never introduced in Congress or another proposal entirely. But he has previously described such a system as one that prioritizes high earners and skilled workers over those with family ties to the U.S. and eliminates what he calls chain migration, under which U.S. citizens and green card holders can sponsor their family members for immigration benefits. Trump's tenure has already had a significant impact on legal immigration patterns in the U.S., leading to a 43% decline between the end of fiscal year 2017 and 2019 in the precise category that he has sought to eliminate, family-based immigration petitions. Under his vision of merit-based immigration system, those numbers could decrease even further. Whether any version of that proposal will get traction would largely depend on the makeup of the next Congress and whether Democrats win a majority in the Senate. Most immigration policy experts aren't convinced that Trump will see success in negotiating with Democrats, but the political calculus could change if Democrats control both chambers of Congress and need Trump to sign their legislation. It also depends on Republicans acting as a unified front on immigration. So far, pro-business Republicans aren't challenging the restrictions and travel bans Trump has imposed during the pandemic. And as the U.S. continues to grapple with its worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, and more than 1 million Americans are out of work, they will likely continue to follow the president's lead. But in the long term, they might find themselves at philosophical odds with the anti-immigrant wing of the party. I think the reality of the economics of immigration and the sort of more ideological agenda are going to come into conflict, Rivlin said. But if Trump can overcome those hurdles, the prize would be substantial, the ability to leave his mark on the immigration system beyond a series of executive actions that could be reversed by the next Democrat who assumes office. Merit-based immigration reform would be a legacy for him on immigration more so than a border wall, the Bipartisan Policy Institute's Cardinal Brown said, that would have impact on the future of immigration for decades. So that's a pretty comprehensive look at what Trump has been doing and is doing. We're nearing, it's already October. Next month is the election. I've already voted. I don't know about you, but if you haven't, I would suggest that you do so early and get it done because one, it's safer, less people out and about early. Although I must say, my early voting experience was not really dissimilar to when I vote on election day. It was in a different place than I usually go to, but there was, a steady stream of people coming and going, and it was a long line and stuff. Fortunately, it was in a great big room. It was in a gymnasium, and everyone was properly socially distanced, and everybody had masks on. So I felt fairly comfortable with the whole thing. I didn't, I was concerned going in, just thinking, an enclosed space, bunch of strangers standing around. But, it was well done and well run. And it was surprising. I mean, this was like, Monday or something. It was a Monday. And the place was full. And it never stopped, from I walked in at the end of the line, and when I was walking out the door, the line was just as long as it was when I went in. So yeah, people are voting. And I think, if I could offer a little nudge in your direction, I would say, yeah, get out and vote early. If you can squeak away from work or whatever on your lunchtime or something, it didn't take so long that it couldn't be done in a lunch hour. Yeah, just get it done, because we need to get everybody voting. We need to send a clear and definitive message to Washington, I guess you could say, that we expect something different. We expect change. We want change. It is time for change. And I hate to bring this up, but accusations of tampering and all these different things that have been going on for a while now, are setting the stage for a dispute. And if it's not an overwhelming victory, it's really sad to say this, but that's been the way it's been in the Senate for a long time now. If you want to do something, you have to get 60 plus votes. It's hardly ever a situation where just the majority decides. Now it has to be a supermajority that decides everything, which is ridiculous. And it's the same way with this election. If it's not an overwhelming victory, there are going to be more people questioning it than not. And that is a problem. That's a huge problem. And it's a problem we're going to have to face one way or the other. As somebody in the farthest margins of what could be called the media, this kind of weird split system where we have the mainstream media, which is like most everything. Sorry, I'm waving my hands in front of the camera. You won't see that on the radio, but you will see that on the TV version. You have like the real media, which I would call the mainstream media. And then you have this right-wing media, which is like, might as well be from another planet half the time. They went from, it's a lot of history involved here, and it's hard to know where to begin. I'm going to run out of time before I've really done justice to this. But I'll say briefly that for a long time, people in the right wing, the more conservative side, have complained that the media was too liberal and that it wasn't being fair to them. And so somehow they went from pushing to sort of have their own voice, consistently conservative voice, opinion, attitude, point of view. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm a consistently liberal, left-leaning voice and point of view. But the difference is that I am bound by the truth. Yeah, I say stupid things once in a while. I'm not always accurate. I have to sometimes correct myself. But generally speaking, if you went back to every last one of my episodes, you would see that everything that I was saying was true. You could find sources that supported it. I don't say things just because they sound good or because they help make my point. I say things because they're true, and that is what forms the basis of my point. My point is based on the fact that these things have happened. These things are happening. These people are doing these things, and so on. And from that, I come up with the position that I hold. But in the so-called right-wing media sphere, whatever you want to call it, that's no longer how it seems to work. They went from wanting to have their own space where they could kind of view everything through their own lens to having their own reality. And I think while Trump isn't responsible for that, he's pushed that from being a sort of a general thing that was going on to something that's just like endemic. I mean, this is like built into the thing now, to where they don't care. They just say what sounds good. I mean, that last article was a case in point. Some of the stuff Trump said is just like, okay, none of this is true. But he can say it because he's president, and so we'll listen to him. And the right-wing media sphere can repeat it because there's no one there saying, but actually that's not true. And I don't, my larger point is that we're going to have to face that one way or the other. So let's say the election goes the way I wish it would go. Trump's pushed out of office. We get Biden in there. We take back the Senate. So we've got unified control, House, Senate, and administration. That's good. We can undo a lot of the damage that Trump has done, can fix a lot of things he's broken, but we can't fix that tendency to live in their own reality that seems to pervade so much of the right-wing ecosphere, I guess you could call it. And I don't know what it would take to do that, because I certainly wouldn't want to see any presidential proclamations that, you can't quote Rush Limbaugh or, something like that. But at the same time, I just don't know how to fix that. There's some kind of social movement has to take over where people say, no, we're going to rely on facts. We're going to believe in science. We're going to rely on facts. And we're going to pursue the direction that those take us in, not go off running around chasing our tails and pursuing phantoms that are conjured up to scare people or inspire people or otherwise mislead them. So this is a big thing that we're going to have to confront here going forward, no matter what happens in this election. And I suspect I will be here years from now fighting this same fight in different ways, because there's going to be somebody making crackpot statements about immigrants because it's an easy target. It's a traditional target for this group, and somebody's going to have to push back on it. And I'm going to be one of those somebodies pushing back on it because it has to be done. And I feel badly about it, but that there doesn't seem to be any way around it. So, think with me on this, because I'm going to be thinking about this too in the coming weeks and months. Like, how can we fight disinformation? What can we do about the prevalence of people saying things that sound good but don't mean anything or that aren't true? It's something that needs to be done. Anyway, I'm sort of veering off the subject, but it's really important for immigrants because they don't have the same voice that the people who are already here, who've been here for a long time, have. The immigrants can't push back in the same way that they can be pushed against. And that's why people like me exist. Anyway, I've used up all my time. This has been CU Immigration here on WRFU-LP and UPTV, and we'll see you next time.